Welcome to the show, and if you would, please let folks know who you are, where do you live, what kind of work do you do?
Well, Ron, thanks for having me, man. My name is Bill Nussey. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been here for a couple of decades. I spent my career building companies, and after a couple of decades in the tech space, I'm all in on building clean energy ventures now.
Outstanding. And sort of a pre-start, we like to help frame the conversation with, we call it a quantum quote, an inspirational quote that you feel kind of guides who you are and what you do and how you do it. And you have one you care to share, Bill?
I got a lot of quotes I like, but there's one that I think sums up the work that's been put into this book I've written and sort of my mission in life. And it's a quote from Robert F. Kennedy. And he said, "Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation."
Powerful words. Thank you so much. Those are great. Well, how about you, Bill? Why? Why do you do this stuff? What motivates you, man?
Well, I was old enough to have a chance to step back and say, what do I want to do with this second half of my career? And I wanted to check three boxes. I wanted to do something that really mattered to the planet, to the future, to my children and their children. I wanted to do something that helped a lot of people that were struggling today. People in the poor parts of the world and poor parts of the U.S. And lastly, I'm enough of a capitalist that I wanted to do something that had an opportunity to grow into a business that matters. And I found that clean energy actually checks all those boxes in the biggest way I could have possibly imagined. And so I just knew I had to be in it. Didn't know anything about it. So the plan based on some advice from a friend was, well, go write a book. You can talk to the smartest people in the world, ask the dumbest questions, build a world-class network. And here I am a couple of years later, and it worked.
That's great. So that's a really fascinating entree. As somebody who's been doing this for 3 decades, it's interesting to see how the new arrivals come at it. So I love that
Yes, that's
perspective.
me.
That's you,
Newbie,
man. It's
newbie.
awesome. That's great, though. It's fantastic. So, okay. So what do you do then, Bill?
Well, I finished writing the book December of last year, so I've spent most of 2022 marketing it. It's done really well, sold lots of copies, and done this expected speeches and articles and interviews and things like that, and a couple podcasts. Super excited to be on this one, and so the vision has always been to use the knowledge and the networks gained to create ventures, think startups, think funds, and I've had a pretty I'm very happy with the career I've had. I've grown several companies to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and had billions of dollars of value created for the shareholders who invested in my companies. And so I feel like now I'm at a point to take that experience and turn it into a series of new ventures that will allow me to make a dent in the universe, as Steve Jobs would say, in the world of clean energy. So I'm working on several, and if you are someone who follows me, you'll see several announcements coming in the as the year moves on.
Great. So, and the name of the book and where people can get it?
The book is called Energy, Freeing Energy. And there's a podcast and there's a book, and you can get the book pretty much anywhere. Amazon's easy. If you prefer other places, it's available in a lot of independent bookstores on Kobo and many other places. It's available pretty much everywhere. And I'll have to shout out that the worked with a great partner to do the audio version for people like me that actually prefer listening to reading. And the audio version is a lot of fun. Very well done.
Outstanding. And the podcast is also freeing energy, right?
Yes, it is. It's we did that to when people read my early work, they said, do you want it to sound like a textbook? And I said, well, no. And they said, well, you need some stories, you need some humanity. And a couple of people said, why don't you start a podcast? And that way you can talk to people, heroes, we call them heroes of freeing energy, get their stories, hear their insights and their personal backgrounds, and use that to add color and humanity to the book. And so a lot of the people on my podcast are now stories in the book.
Outstanding. So, like, I just give us a couple of examples just so people have an idea about who you're talking about and some of the stories there.
So one of my favorite stories in the book and in the podcast is a guy named Samir Ibrahim, and he lives in Kenya. He grew up in the U.S., and he has started what's now the largest solar-powered irrigation company in all of Africa. He's been recently featured by CNBC as one of the most high-impact entrepreneurs in East Africa, and I had the chance. I actually met him when I was traveling through Africa researching for the book, and I met him, and we became great friends and have been ever since. And he is on my podcast with his amazing personal story. Uh, a child of immigrants and huge ties to Africa. He's spent the last 10 years there. And so he tells a story in my podcast that I also have the privilege of sharing a bit of that story in the book as well as context for the opportunities and the challenges for the 770 million people in Africa that have no electricity at all. But just to be clear, the most of the book is about is U.S. focused. But the exciting part is that the echoes of fixing it in the U.S. will actually fix or help address the problems in Africa and vice versa. Part of what I wanted to do when I discovered it was share how much the technologies that are going to get us to a clean energy future are really span the globe. If you do right by Africa, you do right by, East Los Angeles. I mean, it's the whole world is connected in this way, in a very business dollars and cents kind of way. And I love to make that connection and share the stories of people on every part of the world who reflect it.
Outstanding. So along that lines, like, how do you see the clean energy future that people are going to move to sustainable energy?
Yeah, I tell you, man, the thing that I, as a newbie, that I'm getting my head around is that for a century, energy, electricity, hydrocarbons, fossil fuels, everything, these were all essentially fuel-based business models. So what you had to do is you had to take something out of the ground, you had to refine it, you had to ship it, you had to burn it, then sometimes you had to clean up the waste. Normally you just threw it in a pond behind the power plant, but there was waste. My grandkids will be paying for cleaning it up, but my parents didn't worry about it because their generation just threw it out there. Anyhow, the thing that's so cool that's changing is that solar and batteries are technologies; they're not fuels, and this is so profound in terms of the impact it's going to have on the transition. And the people that have been in this for decades, I don't see them getting their head around the fact that 10 years ago solar was something for the environment. And today solar is, well, a lot of people kind of get that it's cheaper. And what they really don't get their head around is in another 10 years, solar is going to be so cheap that nobody's going to look at it and say, well, I think I'd rather just stay on the grid. I'd rather just use it's going to be so inexpensive that it's going to be a forcing function that's going to just, but barrel roll over all the policy and all the incumbent power. This is a tsunami that's coming that very few people appreciate, but yet nobody denies that solar is going to be cost 2/3 less than it does today. But very few people have thought through how that creates an unstoppable reality in the transition, especially for small scale stuff, which is what my book focuses on. And I think we'll see is every home and every building will have solar and batteries in it, not because they're environmentalists, not because there's subsidies. It's going to be because it's the cheapest way to generate electricity, and it's the most reliable, sustainable, and independent. So I think it's just inevitable. The question: do we get there in 7 or 8 years, or 15 or 20 years? And that may depend on some policy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's fascinating to me is that solar and wind are actually the two cheapest sources of electricity now on the planet, and cost competitive with that other last century renewable energy source from hydropower in the water. And the great things about renewables, of course, is that once you build the infrastructure, the water flows, you get free electricity. The wind blows, you get free electricity. The sun shines, you get free electricity because you have the infrastructure, and then all you have to do is maintain it. So about the cheapest source of power once you get beyond the capital cost. So
let me give you something provocative, because wind, hydro, and solar have something dramatically different. They're often lumped into the same boat, particularly if you use an eye towards an environmental impact. Wind and hydro are giant machines.
Yep.
And solar is a technology. And so the reason that solar 10, 15 years ago was actually a lot more expensive than wind, and now it's probably a bit cheaper than wind. But if you've got 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's going to be way cheaper than wind. And here's some fun numbers. So what's the most expensive way to generate electricity? Nuclear, right? 400. So we built 440 nuclear power plants in the history of energy, right? So we haven't had a lot of chance to sort of fine tune it. It takes a couple of decades to build them. So 2,500 coal plants, 5,000 natural gas plants across the world. So where does the price drop really start happening? With wind? We built 500,000 wind turbines since we started building them. And so the price has gone down a lot. It's fairly steady, but wind is also a big machine. So in order to get the prices down, you have to make bigger and bigger turbines. You have to go offshore. It's getting kind of complicated. And at some point, making it bigger, as we've seen in nuclear plants, doesn't make it any cheaper. Since the same time, over the same time frame, we as humanity has built 120 billion solar cells. So 500,000 wind turbines to 120 billion solar cells. We're making these things in factories all over the planet, particularly in China. And so that 120 billion one day is going to be 500 billion, and one day a trillion. And then we might have 1 million wind turbines. But the rate of manufacturing of solar and batteries has no other type of energy generation can touch it or ever will. That's why I think it's going to be the cheapest, just like your iPhone keeps getting better every year.
Yeah, your point is very well taken. It's the advantage of solar. It's all solid state technology, and as you said, it's much more smaller and multiplies. And the more you multiply it, the cheaper it gets. And yeah, it's pretty dramatic. You're absolutely right. And the nice thing about solar too is you got some amount of sun, no matter where you are on the planet.
Right.
Whereas you got to be very particular with wind, and there's even fewer sources of hydro. So solar is ubiquitous. It's across the board. So excellent,
Great
excellent
equalizer.
example. Yeah. So give a couple of examples of things that you think are working. What do we need more of? What's in the way and what can we do about it?
I think that the examples that I get excited about, and really is the heart of this book I wrote, is the small scale stuff, the rooftop solar, the microgrids. These are taking off across the planet. We built about 3 million solar rooftops in the United States. That number is growing rapidly. I think it's even more exciting when you look at microgrids, when you couple the solar with a battery system and you have something that can essentially generate energy into perpetuity 24/7. And one of there's a couple of fun stories in the book. One is about a poor rural school in the mountains of Puerto Rico, and what a solar microgrid did to fundamentally change that community after Hurricane Maria hit and kept the community in the dark for 6 months. But I also travel to the wealthiest parts of the world and visit the most sophisticated microgrid, I think in the world, which is in Northern California and wine country. It's called a Stonehenge, which is a winery, a farm that grows grapes and other vegetables. And the thing's entirely off grid. It's a very large farm, dozens of acres, irrigation, heating, and they run this entire thing entirely off grid from PG&E. And the stories, like when the wildfires have come through that area, it was the only place in the entire region with lights on, because all the power outages. And so I think these examples are wonderful examples of what's happening. But these examples face a massive amount of friction, partially because the costs are still a little high to add batteries to these systems, but also we've got $4 trillion a year of incumbents who make oil and gas. We've got $2 trillion a year of incumbents that generate electricity, the utilities. And these folks, most of them know this clean energy future is coming, but they really would like it to take as long as possible. So they have lots of time to figure out how to be relevant through the transition. And this is, I think, one of the great challenges of our generation, is to make this happen faster than the incumbents want it to.
So what do you think the biggest things that people can do are?
It's really simple. If you have a roof and you have the good fortune to have a little bit of money, then go put solar on your roof. If you don't have those options, get community solar. Those are in the research of the book I did, I found some studies on what an individual family or person can do to reduce their carbon footprint. And the studies that I found showed that short of riding a bicycle 100% of every place you're going to go, which is not often possible, the best thing you can do is power your life with solar. Put it on your roof if that's an option for you, and get community solar if you can't get it on your roof. And that has a much larger reduction in carbon footprint than, say, going vegan, which you should do too if that's what you want to do. But it's the number one thing you can do. And the cool thing about solar is that every time you buy a panel, you're making it just a bit cheaper for the next person to buy one. So it's what we in business call a network externality. Everybody that participates makes it better for the ones that follow. And you can't say that about fossil fuels and things like that. So it's a really unique characteristic of solar being a technology. And the other thing is, if you have the means, you drive an electric car instead of a petrol-powered car. That's a very large benefit, especially if you drive a lot. Those two things: solar on your roof or community solar, and EVs or electric transportation.
And the third piece of the energy equation is your heating system and your heating and cooling, hot water
Yes.
system, and go into heat
Thank you.
pumps and using solar to generate those heat pumps as well.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And then when I was interviewing, my first interview was Amory Levins, who's the founder of Rocky Mountain Institute. And I went through my ideas with him for the book. And he said, you're forgetting the most important one. He said, what's the cleanest, cheapest source of carbon-free energy there is? And he said, don't use energy at all. He called it negawatts, efficiency. So he said,
Yeah.
you got to include efficiency in your book, which I did.
Yep. Cheapest source of energy is the one you don't use. So absolutely. Yeah,
Well
no
said.
doubt
Well
about it.
said, Ron.
No doubt it. No doubt at all. So yeah, no, that's Amory's quote. So I remember that from a long time ago. I saw Amory and he was one of my inspirations as well, Bill. So
Me too. Me
it's
too.
great that you
He's
had him on
probably
the
the
show.
single reason I got into this, the first reason I got into this. Yeah.
He's an amazing guy and he's done fantastic work. And his wife Hunter, or his ex-wife Hunter, actually is also a big person.
Yeah.
She actually teaches in the Hudson Valley in New York at Bard's College sometime, and
Wow.
she runs classes, MBA classes. So yeah, there's a whole program there, the sustainability program that's really excellent, and she's one of the teachers in it. So yeah, the two of them were and they're just powerhouses. So tremendous, amazing thinkers and planners and activities, and the Rocky Mountain Institute that Amory and Hunter founded is now going strong and doing yeoman's work, amazing work across the world. So
Yeah.
all right, excellent.
The first story in my book about this Puerto Rican school was a project that actually was done and led by Rocky Mountain Institute. So they are incredibly inspiring through the whole book for me.
Outstanding. Great. So I think you've touched on it, but maybe there's another, like we call them a unique supernova, an idea about clean energy, one unique tip, tool, a tactic that most people need to know, but probably don't. But maybe it's one you've already covered, but you got a different one you want to share? Besides efficiency and going solar and electric vehicles and heat pumps. Now that we hit them all.
Yeah, I think those cover it, man. I mean, and get educated. I think
Uh-huh.
anyone who's listening to your podcast is committed to getting educated. And I always try to remind people when you want to convince somebody who's not inclined to listen to the urgency of climate change and things like that as a business person, I say fall back to the business side of it if you can, because the numbers are much harder to debate. You know, we can debate whether solar is going to offset some gigatons of carbon and what that's going to do to the future of the health of the planet. But the fact is, it's going to save a bunch of money. And no matter what your politics and ideologies are, saving money is pretty universal. So, and the good news is that clean energy is now the cheapest source, as we said earlier. So you can get people focused on that. I think one of the other ideas I'd leave with you.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely right. Trillions of dollars worth of potential savings to consumers, and then millions of jobs, literally, not hundreds of thousands, literally millions of jobs that we are creating. And actually, clean energy already, I'm part of the Environmental Entrepreneurs, and that organization does a clean energy study. And there are actually more people working in clean energy today, from efficiency through solar and other renewables, heat pumps, electric vehicles, more people working in clean energy than in the entire fossil fuel industry by far. Just dramatic increases in jobs and economic opportunity and employment. And so, yeah, it's win-win-win all the way down the line with clean energy, no doubt about it. All right, well, I'd like to do a little personal piece here, Bill, which is describe your worst either clean energy or business moment and what you got out of it when you hit that bottom, as entrepreneurs often have to go through those trials and tribulations. And if you have a story you'd care to share about yours.
You know, I bet everything to get into clean energy. I had a really good career, had been successful in the traditional tech industry. And most people thought I was crazy to get out of that industry. It's a lucrative industry and people knew who I was. And the question was, why in the world would you get into an industry where nobody knows who you are, to write a book that nobody cares about, to make a business that may or may not work in the future? And I remember my uncle telling me, it's in the stories in the book. And he said, Bill, I think you're awesome, but the solar thing's a disaster. He said, have you heard about Solyndra? I mean, this is just an example of how unfinanceable. The government's throwing a ton of money at it. He's now a big supporter of solar, by the way, but he had the perspective that many people did. This is a huge mistake. And I got to tell you, Ron, a couple of years into it, as I was trying to put my entrepreneurial lens towards what can I do in the clean energy space, I got pretty depressed because everything I saw really ran into the need for policy change, which is, very difficult and slow. And everything required us to work through electric utilities. And utilities are great companies. They've electrified the country. in the world, but they're also the largest impediment to the innovation that's needed to really drive this forward. So there was a pretty low moment for me when I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my career. But I remember there's about 3 months where I said, I'm gonna give myself 90 days to see if there's some other angle here, some way where entrepreneurs can participate, people that want to innovate and move quickly. And that's when I stumbled into the notion of local energy, the small scale stuff, solar, solar and battery, residential solar, C&I, commercial and industrial solar, and microgrids. And I realized that those are only loosely affected by regulation, and it is legal to build them, and you can build it if you want, and it's competitive. I'm a capitalist to some extent, and so if I want to put rooftop solar, I can go to 3 or 4 companies and say who's going to give me the best deal and who's got the best price and who do I like. I don't have that choice here in Georgia where I live for electricity. I got Georgia Power. That's my only option, and I have some serious issues with what Georgia Power chooses to do. I'm grateful they do a great job in really important ways, but I do wish I had more say with them, but they don't care because they got me. I have no choice. So I think that when I realized over this 90 days that I at the end of that, I hadn't made a mistake, there was a great way for entrepreneurs and innovators to do their magic, to bring to the world what they've done in other industries. I got excited again, but there was a tough 90 days.
Wow, interesting. So, you mentioned Solyndra, which is the big bogey that is always thrown out by the fossil fuel industry and other anti-clean energy folks about a wasted investment. And the fascinating thing to me, and this was a study also by environmental entrepreneurs, was that government program, which was a venture capital program, right? It was meant to basically take risk and help support industries that would normally have a tough time going out there and getting capital and competing, right? And actually, one of the success stories in that program was Tesla himself, who then repaid back all those government loans. That program was 99%. The cash was repaid by all the industry. Solyndra was the 1%, was one of the 1% that didn't make it. And to me, if I talked to my kids and my kid brought home a 99, I'd be like, great job, not, you missed the 100, man. It's like,
I actually think it's returned more than its original capital at this point.
Oh yeah, it's gotten a great return on investment. It's done tremendous.
And so there's two that have gone under, I believe. And now to connect the dots, a lot of people don't realize that's the same program that's now run by another hero of mine, Jigar Shah, the Loan Program Office. So it's the same program. And it kind of went dormant under President Trump, but it's really revitalized now and it's coming back. It's got $40 billion of money left to spend. And it's not venture capital, it's loans. It's actually pretty conservative and loan guarantees.
Yep.
And the single largest investment that was made in that entire fund, a lot of people don't know this, larger than Solyndra by 20 times. It's this nuclear power plant in Georgia.
The one that didn't make it, right?
No, they're still working on it.
They are working on it. Oh, it's been how many years? I'm sorry, I apologize.
16 years. 16 years. I think it's 9 years over. It's 9 years delayed or something like that. But
and how many billions over? Just out of curiosity.
About 15 billion over budget. It's going to be about 30 when it's done. And it would never have happened had the U.S. government, because they had a sister plant in South Carolina, is the one you're thinking of, and that they both got spawned at the same time.
Right.
And the reason that the Vogel plant here in Georgia didn't go under is because the government's guaranteed the loan. And so it's unimaginable how much taxpayer money will be lost if that plant is ultimately not built, although it looks like it will. And the cool thing about being the electric utility, government granted monopoly. So what happens when you're way over budget, it's not needed anymore. So what do? You just raise the rates of all the people. So I've got everyone in Georgia that uses Georgia Power has a little line item on there that says, I forget what it's, sort of nuclear overcharge. And this is basically just we're not getting any value for it. We're just helping Georgia Power make sure that they remain super profitable to continue to pay off that nuclear plant. And I think utilities play a really important role. And I think there's roles for monopolies there, but boy, that's an example of when it doesn't work.
Yeah. So many people don't know my sordid history of my upbringing. So I was actually, up until college, I was actually a big supporter of nuclear power. I always thought that it was the energy source that was going to take us to the stars.
I did too.
Yeah. And, when it first came out, it was going to create energy too cheap to meter. It was going to be so amazing. It was just going to be so cheap, so great. It was just astonishing.
You're showing
I was
your age
supported, right?
by quoting that.
Yeah. Well, and then I wound up being a security guard at 21 years of age, working as a day job as a beach guard, a night job as a security guard at the Shoreham nuclear power plant, which for those of you who happen to live around New York may remember, it was a nuclear power plant that was going to be out in Long Island, out in Shoreham, New York. And after billions of dollars of cost overruns with that one, as well as some upstate plants, the Long Island Lighting Company went bankrupt to the tune of $7 or $8 billion worth of government bailout. And the Long Island Power Authority was born from the government bailout of this public utility, which is actually a private utility, an investor-owned utility. Yeah, fascinating thing. So I could tell you.
I wish I'd known that. I would have written about it in the book.
It's a nice ancillary, right? So yeah, it's an amazing thing, and nuclear power can be interesting, no doubt. It's a carbon-free source, but there's a whole host of issues, not the least of which is getting rid of the waste at the end, but then the cost overruns and the fact that, you got a nuclear power plant sitting in your backyard. The other thing that also is very disturbing to me is that in New York, we had another power plant that was just recently shut down, the Indian Point power plant, which is outside of New York City, which had 2,000 megawatts worth of power, significant amount of power that supplied the Westchester area as well as mostly New York City. And that was just shut down. And part of the reason it was shut down, besides some number of other cost issues, was the fact that the plane that took out the second World Trade Center tower went right over it. And initially they were going to dive bomb into that nuclear power plant as a way of disrupting the world. And if you think that 9/11 was a historic catastrophe with billions of dollars worth of damage, as well as the lives lost, think about a not a nuclear explosion, but the dispersion of nuclear material over, let's say, a 30-mile area outside of New York City, what that would have done to the New York economy as well as the world economy. Yeah, it was a fascinating little-known statistic that people don't like to talk about because, hey, scary as hell, right? So that power plant was just shut down, which to my perspective is a good thing. And yeah, we got to replace that power now. And the fastest, easiest way to replace that power? Solar.
Yes, sir.
And I work with a lot of developers and as well as other governments, nonprofits, and businesses who are moving to solar and to other clean energy sources because economically it makes the most sense. It's the best way of getting your power, and then you add in battery storage, and now you got resiliency too for when the grid goes down. So save money, save energy, save the world, and do yourself a favor all along the way. But yeah, so anyway, sorry to get this to step aside there for a moment. So okay, Great. We're going to enter into the Pulsar round, and this is where we're going to ask you a series of questions, and we're looking for your short, succinct, amazing, and mind-blowing answers. Are you ready, Bill?
I am.
Here we go. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Follow the road less traveled. I think it's incredibly easy to fall into the things you're supposed to do and be the person that everyone thinks you're supposed to be. And every time in my life, in my career, when I was supposed to do X, Y, or Z, not because I was a rebel, because I just had a different vision for myself. I did something different. And I have to tell you, I wrote down all these things I learned over the last 30 years. And when my oldest son was graduating from college and my youngest son was graduating from high school, I wrote it all in a book for them. And it's called Your Mountain is Waiting. And so this is and some people read it and they're like, this is actually a really good book. So I put it on Amazon to sell, but it's don't sell nearly as many copies as I do of my energy book, but I think it's really important to take the time. I love that you asked this question. What did you learn? What can you share? Distill it down. Tell your stories. There's a lot of wisdom that people have gained, and they just don't realize it. It's good to ask.
Yeah, great. Well, Your Mountain is Waiting, on Amazon too. Awesome. Fantastic.
Yes, sir.
I got to check that out as well. All right, share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success, please.
I have two, but the first one is that I take crazy big notes. And I use tools, digital tools, to keep track of them and source every article. Like after you and I are done, I'm going to write down all the notes and they'll all be organized. And I found that, and then I go back and if it's a project that's ongoing, I reorganize it. And I find that creates a continuity and ability to accomplish goals that very few things do. And then I think I also, and I talk about this in that book I mentioned, is always have three things. Every day of your life, say, what are the three things I want to get done for the next year or the next 6 months? And always have those written down. They're sitting right down over there on my wall. And I think having constant reminders at the beginning of your day and the end of the day, what are the three things I'm working towards that really matter? Not the 20 things. The idea of picking three is powerful, Three is a magic number in the sense that everyone can keep three in their head pretty easily. Most people can't keep five. And it just creates clarity. Why am I busy this day? Did I accomplish my greater goals? So always have three things, three goals.
Top three priorities. Outstanding. All right. An internet resource that you think people should know about.
I am a disciple of a tool called Notion, and it's a new kind of tool. It's really difficult to describe, but everybody I know that's used it, it's a way to create documents for yourself, to organize its little databases. It's the fastest, simplest way to create organization around your life. You have to be a little techie. You have to think about how to organize things, but I'm just going forward. Every business I start, every project I'm currently working on is all run on Notion, and it's a cross between a word processor, a database, a wiki, if you know what that is, and a to-do management system and project management. And it's nothing like, well, there's a couple of products like it now, but it's a brand new class of software. Give Notion a try. I have no ownership, it's a great tip.
Notion.
Yes, sir.
There you go, Notion. All right, what book would you recommend to awesome Earth-kind people, and why?
When I first got into this, yeah, really. When I first got, yes, read one of Nussey's books. But I ask a lot of people, what book should I read? Because I really want to understand the business side, the political side of energy, like the dollars and cents. And I got the same answer several times. And it was the very first book I read, which is a book called The Prize by Daniel Yergin. And this is a Pulitzer Prize winning book, and it's about the history of oil. Now, my reaction initially was, I don't really care about the history of oil. And the answer I got was, if you want to understand the economics of where any kind of energy, including electricity, fits into the world, the way in which politics and money and technology intersect, this book is riveting. And I'm somewhat of a student of history, not a big one, but it rewrote my perspective of how America and the world grew up, the rise of the Middle East. And it's super well researched. And Daniel Yergin is an amazingly famous author now because of that book. It's not a light read, but it's a fun read. It's an entertainment read for business-minded people like me.
Excellent. The Prize. All right. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change one thing for everybody in the world, what would it be?
Well, Ron, that's a great question. And again, I have two answers, and I apologize. I'm breaking your rules, but
That's okay.
Because I feel so strongly about, from one angle, what I do for the world and what would I do for the industry. And so the first answer for the world, if I could have one thing that I could change in the world, it'd be, I would help everybody be a little more wary of convenient answers. If someone tells you an answer, it's as simple as, well, it's those people, or the establishment doesn't want you to know this, or any of those kind of things, you just got to put your skeptic hat on and take a second look. And if I could help everybody take that quick 30-second review, this doesn't make sense to me, I think the world would be in a far better situation than it is today on every level. I think for the industry, if I could wave a magic wand, is I wish batteries cost in 2023 what they'll cost in 2030. And if not, even if that's too much to ask for, the people would have conviction in 2023 what they'll actually cost in 2030, and then they would make entirely different decisions. But nobody that plans and runs the grid today can get their head around the fact that the cost of solar and batteries are just declining year over year. Every group agrees that they're going down. I have in my book, I have 400 citations, and they go to places on my website that have hundreds of spreadsheets and 1,000 citations. And the data is unequivocal. There's no one that disagrees that batteries and solar are getting cheaper, but yet no one's acting on it. They're not making any decisions around the fact that they're going to get cheaper. They look at sometimes where they are now, very often where they were 2 or 3 years ago, the prices. And those are driving all current decisions. And I wish that people could realize that this is a technology, not a fuel. Plan for the fact that in 10 years, you're not going to ever want to buy natural gas because solar and batteries are going to be so cheap.
Yeah, outstanding. Great comments, great thoughts. Thank you very much for those. Excellent. All right. Yeah, we got a minute. You got a WTF or F story, weather time fudge, an extreme weather event you lived through, and care to share the story, or the most fun you've ever had and the type of weather it was when you were doing it?
I actually I tried hard on this, man, and I'm too much of an indoor guy. I think
Okay,
it's
no worries, no worries,
no
no
great
worries,
answers
no
here. No
worries.
great
That's
answers
okay.
here.
People have different stories. Dennis Hayes, the original organizer of Earth Day, who now runs the Bullet Foundation out west, another contemporary of Amory Lovins, and who's done some amazing works.
Yes.
He had a great story. But anyway, we all have some stories, and we have others, so not a problem. All right, what's the one thing you're most energized about today, Bill?
I thought about 100 things, Ron, and then it hit me like a lightning bolt, metaphor completely intended. I think the most exciting thing that I look at in the industry is the Ford 150 Lightning, the EV powered version of the most popular vehicle sold in the United States. First of all, it's almost Tesla-esque in that it's just a cool vehicle, right? It's a cool vehicle that whether you own it, you've never owned an EV or it'll be your fifth one, you want to own it.
Yep.
But it is, Tesla built its reputation on being a product for the elite, and they're coming down in market now wonderfully and successfully. But Ford took the most popular car in the history of the world and they made it incredibly attractive to everybody. So you don't have to be an EV fan. If you love a Lightning, you buy a Lightning, it's going to be better, faster. It's going to be pull more loads. It's a better car. And I think that's going to cause a very large number of people to say, whoa, wait a minute. So this electric thing isn't just for the fancy, left coasters. This is something that everybody can use. And that's got me very excited. And I am on the list to buy one.
There you go. Awesome. So the other thing I really like about the F-150 is the fact that it is also a mobile power station where you could take it into the woods and run all your power equipment out of it. Or even better, if the grid goes down, you can plug your house into it and it'll run your house for like 3 days, the average family, which I think is just amazing. The vehicle to grid opportunities with batteries and battery storage, mobile battery storage systems are just another whole avenue. I don't know if you did that in your book. I have to
Absolutely.
dive in,
This is a huge story. And my whole book's about small scale energy and
there you go.
V2G.
There you go.
And, but V2G is people, you and I talk about this in our geeky conversations about the energy future, but because of the Ford 150, people that live in rural parts of the world, and I have relatives that would never think about an EV, but they're saying, I could power my house with my car. They're scratching their heads. This is new. It just opens minds, changes minds. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm so excited about it. Plus it's just a badass car.
Yeah, it's great. It really is. And I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you so much. It's awesome. Yeah, I could see that being a very energizing thing. All right. So what's the next thing for you? Where are you going after now? You got your book, you got your podcast. What's going to be next for you, Bill?
Well, I've been working on a small startup I spend a few hours a week on called Solar Inventions. And it's the work of one of the Suniva scientists. If you remember Suniva back in the day, the solar company in the US, and one of the guys that invented most of those products is a business partner of mine. And we've created and are now attempting to commercialize a new architecture for silicon solar that has some benefits that it sort of makes it better and cheaper. And neither one of us is doing that full time, but that's a project I'm working on right now. And I hope to have many other projects like that roll out across the rest of the next year. And I don't think I'll do another one that's quite as sciencey. In my book, I talk about first, second, third, fourth order businesses. And so when you're making stuff with science, it's a first order business, very risky, very slow. You want to be like a fourth order business. Uber is my favorite example of a fourth order business, right? You're just building on someone else's assets and you're making a great solution for everybody. So, keep an eye out for if you follow this space, follow my newsletters or whatever, you'll see some of the new things we'll be coming out with for new businesses as the year progresses.
Outstanding. All right, grand finale. If you would, share a piece of parting advice and the best way for people to connect with you if you'd like them to.
Freeingenergy.com is easily the best way to find me. Freeing Energy podcast, if you like audio more than reading. Obviously, read the book, Freeing Energy, which is available everywhere. But my advice is to people like you and so many others that have been fighting the good fight for decades, that have out there up against incredible odds, making people aware of how important the transition to clean energy really is and how urgent it is. I would push both the people who are resisting your message and the people who are sharing that message that look at the numbers. They're on your side now. They weren't on your side 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was sacrifice and green premium and all kinds of things that required a lot of people to say, this is too much trouble. Now the numbers are on your side, right? You know it, I know it, but this is just not baked into the dialogues every single day about how do we get to clean energy. So focus on the numbers. And they're there. The stories is Wayne Gretzky would say is where, the puck is going there. So let's skate towards it being cheaper is the biggest reason to get 100% of humanity on board with this transition.
Yeah, great point. So just to give my history, so for over 30 years, Bill, I've worked with companies, businesses, nonprofits, governments who were looking to save money at the same time with with
Yes.
clean energy. And while you're right about certain technologies, for instance, solar electric 10, 15 years ago was definitely not a cost-effective option without the subsidies. With the subsidies, you can almost make a business case. But the reality is that for over my 3 decades, I've worked with people on efficiency, energy efficient lighting, for instance, being the low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
Take out a 100-watt light bulb, put in an LED light bulb, you save 80, 90% of your energy and your cost, right? And I did projects with that. So there's always been niche technologies that were cost effective, that could save people money, that were good opportunities, especially when you had different incentives that were put into place. But the thing to me that's most exciting now, and I work with developers all the time, I work with all different types of entities, and they're astonished. They're like, why? I'm looking at the numbers. They're
Right.
incredible. How
Right.
come
Right.
everybody else isn't doing this? And that's my question exactly. How come you're not doing it now? Because there's a way to save money doing it. It's here. It's now. It's not the far-flung future. We have this opportunity to save money and save the world and do well by doing good today. And it's more than ever, and it's across the board of all technologies now. So it's not just solar. Solar is definitely going to be the lead, but it's heat pumps, air and ground source, geothermal heat
Absolutely.
pumps. It's cost effective. It's a way of saving money. It's a way of having more comfort and better quality living. And then it's electric vehicles. They're faster, they're smarter, they're cheaper, they're more fun. They're just across the
Better
board.
product.
And you get off of gasoline. You don't have to pay $5 a gallon or whatever else you're complaining about today for the price of gas. We need to do it. It has to do it. And you know what? We're going to do it because it's a better way to go and it's cheaper. So let's all do it. So wonderful.
There we
Bill
are, brother.
Nussey, thank you very much, sir. It's an honor and a pleasure. So glad to be on the show. Can't wait to listen to more of your podcast and to read all your books, including the one for your kids. So thanks for sharing that one. I got to share it with mine as well. And anything that you wanted to touch on that we missed, Bill?
No, Ron, this has been fun, super energy, the humankind. And, I'm really excited about the message you're getting out there and honored to be a small part of it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.